Hello class, this is chapter 3, Understanding and Involving the Community. The objectives we're going to cover in this class are as follows. We will explain how U.S. citizens established the quote-unquote public peace. We will define community, understand what the broken windows phenomenon refers to, and list what community demographics include. We will also identify the significant demographic trends shaping the U.S. population, compare and contrast the power structures that typically exist within a community, and summarize the ways in which citizens and communities have been involved in community policing. In the United States, each community is part of a larger social order. The United States Constitution, Bill of Rights, federal and state statutes, and local ordinances establish a quote-unquote public peace. Individual freedom and rights are balanced with the need to establish and maintain order. A social contract is for everyone to receive justice. Each person must relinquish some individual freedom. Community is defined in many ways. Community can refer to a specific geographic area served by a police department or law enforcement, and also community is defined as a feeling of belonging. Officers must understand and be a part of this defined community. A sense of community is the glue that binds communities together. Social capital means a community looked at and in terms of its social capital or the strength and resilience of its social fabric. Social capital can be found at two levels, local and public. As far as lack of community, areas requiring the most police attention are usually those with the fewest shared values and a limited sense of community. When citizens are unable to maintain an informal social control, the result is a social disorganization and a greater need for formal social control measures. The quote-unquote broken windows phenomenon suggests that if it appears that no one cares, disorder and crime will thrive. In other words, there exists a long-term indirect link between disorder enforcement and a reduction in serious crime. Here's a question for you to consider. Do you feel the quote-unquote broken windows phenomenon is a valid explanation of crime rates? There are other factors that negate a sense of community. One is increasing diversity, which is values of groups within a given area that can clash, a prevalence of violence, and an unresponsive community as a whole. As far as cracking down on crime, in terms of displacement, the relocation of crime and criminals to neighboring areas can occur, but does not really prevent crime. One term that people are familiar with in relation to this is called white flight. There's also the ecology of crime, where there's a tipping point, and again, as I mentioned, white flight. In terms of tipping point, there comes a point where there's a social breakdown in terms of order, and if the sense of order is broken enough, that tipping point comes and then manifests itself in what's called white flight, which isn't necessarily true, but it is a term that people are most familiar with. Now, there are theories of criminality. The classical theory was developed by Italian criminologist Cesare Beccaria, who lived from 1738 to 1794, and holds that people are rational and responsible for their acts. Among the leading opponents to the classical theory was Cesare Lombroso, who lived from 1835 to 1909, who was an Italian criminologist who developed the positivist theory, which holds that how a person acts is fundamentally the result of genetic predisposition and environmental influences. Two theories on criminality are prevalent in the 21st century and are the lack of self-control and strain theories. Now here's the discussion where you'll want to get a study group together either by Zoom or over the telephone, where you divide your group into 3 different groups and assign each of these groups one of the 3 theories of criminality that were mentioned. Have each group present its theory and explain why it addresses the root causes of criminality. Let's talk about assessing the demographics of an area. Demographics includes size, density, employment, ethnic makeup, education, and income. In terms of being homogeneous, that means that the entire demographics of an area are basically similar, whereas heterogeneous means that they're more unlike or dissimilar. A historical reference to that might be the concept of a ghetto. Demographics includes a population's size, distribution, growth, density, employment race, ethnic makeup, and vital statistics such as average age, education, and income. And as I mentioned, a homogeneous community is one in which people are all quite similar versus a heterogeneous community, which is one in which all individuals are quite different from each other. Let's talk about the rapidly changing population and racial and ethnic profile of America in terms of shifts. The truth is that the United States has, since its inception, had a rapidly changing population and a constant shifting of racial and ethnic profiles. In a bifurcated society, there's a widening gap between wealthy and poor with a shrinking middle class, which is a phenomenon that's very much in play today. Trends in the United States that will likely continue mean that a minority population will continue to increase, white dominance will most likely end, legal and illegal immigrants will continue to increase, but that's been our history, and an elderly population will continue to increase as well. In terms of organizations and institutions, community policing means that officers must be familiar with the various organizations and institutions within the community and establish effective relationships with them. This helps to foster cohesiveness. It also allows a shared intolerance of criminal behavior and encourages citizens to cooperate in helping to control crime. As far as the public-private policing interaction, historically, public and private police have seen themselves as being in competition. Private police present a more cost-effective way to protect assets because they typically cost less than public officers and are more plentiful in number. But historically, private security usually gets the quote-unquote short end of the stick. They're viewed as poorly trained and poorly paid. However, 85% of critical U.S. infrastructure is protected by private security. These are so-called private police. With privatization, the security industry can assist law enforcement and assist it effectively. In terms of the power structure, we're talking about formal and informal power structures. Formal means the division of society with wealth and political influence. Informal means religious groups, wealthy subgroups, ethnic groups, political groups, and public interest groups are all part of the informal power structure. Informal power structure groups are entire subcultures that influence other subcultures. The criminal justice system is composed of law enforcement, courts, and corrections. In the criminal justice process, the role of law enforcement is to prevent, detect, or act on reports of law violations, to apprehend suspects reasonably believed responsible for such violations, and to bring those suspects or defendants before a court of law. To help overcome negative opinions and improve public relations, agencies within the criminal justice system are now actively seeking partnerships with others in the community. In terms of citizen involvement with the law enforcement community, community members have a high interest level in their local police departments and have been involved in a variety of ways for many years. Citizen involvement in the law enforcement community and in understanding policing has taken the form of civilian review boards, citizen patrols, citizen police academies, ride-alongs, and similar programs. There are some controversial issues in terms of community justice. Those are including plea bargaining, diversion, sentencing, rehabilitation, alternatives to prisons, victims' rights, and capital punishment. In regards to citizen involvement in the law enforcement community, there are civilian review boards. These are often held in favor of civilian oversight. In other words, the fox can't investigate thefts in the chicken coop. Supporters of civilian review boards believe that police protect each other and cover up illegal or improper conduct, thus the saying that fox can't investigate thefts in the chicken coop. Those who oppose such boards think that they are good in theory, but are poorly executed in reality. Successful resolution of this issue requires that the concerns of both the community and police are addressed. There is striking a balance where you have successful oversight agencies who investigate complaints and proactively seek the underlying causes of police misconduct or problems. Here's another discussion question for you. Are civilian review boards necessary in today's policing? Continuing with citizen involvement in the law enforcement community, the sheriff's posses that handled law enforcement in America's Wild West have evolved to present-day citizen patrols, reserve police programs, and neighborhood watch groups. Many of the citizen patrols established throughout the country focus largely on the drug problem. Citizen patrols can be the eyes and ears of law enforcement. They are sometimes controversial because you can have organizations such as the Alliance of Guardian Angels or the American Border Patrol, which is a non-government sanctioned self-regulating border patrol. These citizen patrols are not new. As I mentioned, there used to be sheriff's posses in America's Wild West. But now we have neighborhood exchange programs which reduces retribution provides additional patrols, and helps reduce danger overall. We now have the advent of citizen police academies. Police academies, which are popular with police departments and citizens, have the benefit of building community support of law enforcement and of helping citizens understand the police much better. We also have citizen volunteers. Volunteers can provide numerous benefits to a department, including maximizing existing resources, enhancing public safety and services, and improving community relations as a whole. Although establishing and maintaining a volunteer program is not cost-free, the return on the investment can be substantial. These citizen volunteers help to supplement and enhance existing departments. And some other services they provide are fingerprinting of children, patrolling shopping centers, checking on homebound residents. They also can provide clerical support and participate in event planning. Now, to summarize what we covered in this chapter, we talked about how community policing must begin with an understanding of what communities are and how they function. We also talked about how community is both a specific geographic area serviced by the police, as well as a feeling of belonging to a particular community by its citizens. To understand a community, police must know about its demographics, its power structure, and the criminal justice system. And restorative justice advocates balance in the community. As always, I encourage you to make sure that you do research outside of your text. Make sure to carefully read your text. And as always, please make sure to contact your instructor should you have any questions about anything that was discussed in this chapter. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and we'll see you next class.